Hi, Nicola. Good morning.
Good morning,
Good
both of you. It's
morning.
so good to be here. Thank you
So
for
good,
having me.
so good to see you. Yes. So we're with Nicola Salter. She is,
An empowerment mindset mentor who has
Thank
been
you.
helping Nikki quite a bit in her journey into entrepreneurship.
yeah, I worked with Nicola over the summertime, and I found her through another coach that I have worked with in the past, and really loved how she focuses on empowering women and men, and also how she works on the mindset, which I think is a huge component of a lot of not only business, but just overall health and lifestyle. So I'm so excited to sit down with you because when we were coaching, we were pretty much just talking about me. So now it's we get to sit down and talk to you and find out your history and really what brought you into the field that you're in. So I feel like to start out, do you want to just kind of give us a little, bit of a history of who you are and how, you became you're doing what you're doing today?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. I'm from London originally, and I began in the corporate world. And I began to find myself helping a lot of women in the corporate field who I was working with, my colleagues actually, who were getting very frustrated with the glass ceiling. They couldn't get promoted. They were balancing family, life. It's still very much the same as it is today. And as I was working, I began to find myself a little bit of a go-to place for these women. So long story short, I started to study in London. I studied holistic medicine. I started to look at how the mind worked, the mind and body work together. I began energy work. I really started at the weekends to dive deeper into more holistic practices because I was very passionate about that and very curious about quantum physics. And I started to take a lot of this knowledge I was learning back into the workplace. And I began to support my colleagues and began to notice a shift in how they were thinking. And it began to occur to me at the time, and bearing in mind this is about 30 years ago, it began to occur to me that really and truly, if you can retrain your mind,
Mhm.
you can do anything you want. And, people have been saying that for a long time, and I didn't really believe them at the time. But I began to see it in person. And then by the time I got to Los Angeles, where I now live, I've been living and working here for the last 25 years, 26 years actually. I set up my practice here and really began to focus on your mindset
Mhm.
and how you can retrain your brain, how you can tell your brain anything. And
Mhm.
then started to study further on practices to help you release negative belief patterns, to help you define what's holding you back, and then start to release that. And I've been here ever since. I've worked with over, I think it's 16,000 people. I'm very, very fortunate. I've worked with groups and lectured with groups, and I help men and women to redefine themselves. And some of that work, like we did together, Nikki, was also to help you redefine yourself, really drop limiting patterns that are getting in your way from creating success for yourself. And then, if you wanted to, discovering your purpose
Mhm.
and then monetizing that if you want to, because I've had a lot of experience with business. So I'm also able to help women do that. So it's been quite the journey. But ultimately, my rule of thumb is you can tell your brain anything.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I learned that with you because when you're going through business, health changes, anything, life changes, you don't really believe that or understand it like you were saying. You kind of feel like this is who I am, this is how my brain works, and that's it. Like I'm stuck with it.
That's right.
And it's so not true. I mean, there are so many tools out there, and it's just having people like you in the field that kind of allow people to see what those tools are and use them. I mean, all of the things that you and I worked on together, and I'm still using those every single day, and they've had a profound difference on who I am, and how I'm, striding through life.
Yes. And as we've worked on, you in some instances and aspects of your life weren't as able to see a way forward because of previous patterns and beliefs and experiences that you'd had. And it's a case of helping an individual see the potential within themselves, but they're so locked in through those neural pathways in the brain that have become like those tracks on a vinyl record, so stuck and integrated. It's like, we can create another track on that vinyl record. We can create another track of belief. But, like all things, it takes time. And so it's creating daily habits that will create that success, and being committed to those daily habits, right? So that your brain can make the change. I mean, they say, and I don't know, Ash, you might disagree with this, but with the research I've done, they say it takes about 61 to 240 days to create a change for yourself with the commitment of a daily habit.
That's true. Yeah, we all have neuroplasticity. And so to create those new neural patterns can take, on average, about up to 6 months.
Yeah. But I think if you're committed, I think it's such a shame that we have people come, or I have people come to me sometimes that have discombobulated completely. And it's at that point they're ready to make the change. You don't need to discombobulate. You can make the change before you fall apart.
Exactly.
It's like preventative medicine, it's preventative health. And I think that I feel like, and weigh in on this, but it seems like people aren't ready to make a change until something bad, I don't know, something negative in their life happens. And then it's like, okay, fine, I'm ready. But we could all just start taking the steps ahead of time. You don't have to get to that point. Yeah, exactly. Suffer.
Exactly. Well, we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
And that's where mentorship comes into play, right? Is helping us realize what our mental roadblocks are and show us what we're not seeing.
Correct. I mean, it's just like taking a great big spotlight and flashing it on someone's path to say, hey, look, these are some areas that we're working together. I collaborate with people. You don't tell them what to do. You're just noticing and observing and suggesting and encouraging. And then the people will see this on their path, and then they can decide if they want to make the change or not. And as you said, people are going to be ready at the right time for that. Yeah, what works for them.
Did you have your own experience with mindset and shifting your beliefs? Like, did you go through your own process where you found a difference?
I did. It's a really good question. I mean, every day there's something, right? It's always a journey. It's never the destination. It's always the journey. And even after all these years, I'm still learning and growing every day, which is great because then I can obviously really empathize and connect with my clients, because it is a daily change. We find different layers of ourselves and things that come up. So yes, part of my journey was to go and learn holistic medicine and different tools to support my mother, who was losing her eyesight with an eye disease. And I really wanted to go in and support her with as much as I could. So my journey began there, and listening to my colleagues at work. So it was always about, I had a tendency to jump in and want to save. It was a thing that I had to rescue, to fix, to save. That was my thing. And I didn't, you understand that? I didn't realize it for the longest time. And, but then gradually began to get very tired and worn out. And some of the tools that I discovered and some of the work that I learned was then for myself, was like, okay, why do I keep burning out? Why am I overgiving here? And of course, then started to learn boundaries. And then why was I going out to try and save and fix, and what was underneath that? Was it that I was needing to please? And then why did I need to please? So it became these beautiful processes of growth, of self-observation for myself. And that's what I say to everyone I work with, be curious about yourself. Start asking yourself some questions. Be honest with yourself. No one's going to stand there and beat you over the head with a saucepan. Only you know what's going on within you. So be curious about yourself. And that way it's a great way of beginning to grow when you start asking the questions. So my part of my journey was that. And then every day, because I work with so many people now, I work at a center for anxiety. I'm the integrative emotional wellness person here as well. I really have to watch my boundaries. I really have to, even down to the point of being careful who I choose to work with outside of the center. Like, when we worked together, there was a whole interview together. Am I a good fit for you? Am I going to meet your needs? And then am I going to be able to come up 200% for you? So constantly asking questions.
Well, and I feel like, when people are trying to do some, improvements on who they are, mentally, I think a lot of people, and I think this is just human nature, and tell me if you agree with this, but I think there's a fear of kind of feeling those emotions and really kind of digging into maybe the past and being vulnerable. And I think that keeps a lot of people from doing the work when we're all human. We all are going through these same emotions. Some people are just better at hiding it than others. And it's just when you start doing the work, you start seeing that you don't, like Ash was saying, you don't have to suffer.
Exactly right. You don't have to suffer. And it is taking that step, like you said, to step out of the fear. And that's why I use the word, let's be curious. When someone comes in, so let's be curious about what's going on. Anything you don't want to share right now, that's fine. But let's be curious about why you want to make a change or what you would love to see for yourself, but you're not quite ready to take the steps yet. There's a very gentle, mindful approach because we've all been there. Nobody likes change. No, none of us like change.
That's very uncomfortable.
It's very, isn't it? Yeah, it's very uncomfortable. The brain is wired to keep us in the same place, and the brain thinks it's keeping us safe ultimately, right? Yeah, it thinks it's doing a great job, but it's wired in our DNA that we don't like change, and so it's not our fault that we don't like change. But now we live in this society, in this culture, we're less likely to be attacked by, well, less likely if you're living in a city to be attacked by bears and dinosaurs, like we were. We have a primordial place in our brain that, thinks it's going to be under attack most of the time. So we do go into survival mode to just cope day to day. And we get used to being in that survival mode. So it becomes our normal until we get sick or depleted. And then we realize we've been generating so much cortisol and all those stress hormones, that it's, it's created inflammation. And there we go down the rabbit hole. So I think for people who are afraid possibly to begin a journey of change, it's to reassure you that this doesn't get done overnight. This is like small daily steps that we take, little daily habits that we break down to change maybe one negative overriding belief that you have, one thought that keeps coming up. It might be, oh, I can't do that because I'm not good enough, or I can't do that because I don't have the knowledge or training, for example. And then it's like, okay, well, what is it that you would need to have the knowledge and training to feel confident? What action would you like to take to build confidence so that then you can step into that? So it's really, for everyone listening, it's really about just being kind to yourself, knowing that you want to make a change, but you will break it down into bite-sized pieces. And then step by step, you will get to where you want to be with a daily commitment to it, but just small,
So what are some of the clients that you're working with on a daily basis? Like, what do those clients look like? Who are people that you're helping?
So it ranges. I'm here as a consultant at the Center for Anxiety here in California to support people who are going through overwhelm, who don't know how to manage their anxiety, stress, post-traumatic stress, triggers from the past, sounds, noises, that kind of thing that will make them feel that they're being attacked or threatened. So it's how to manage those emotions. And that's on the more raw, vulnerable level. And there's also panic attacks thrown into that too. So it's people who are really going through some difficult stuff there. And then in the other work I do, I'm coaching and mentoring individuals to become their best selves, to create their life's design, to understand their why and the impact they have, and then to help them drop those negative beliefs that are preventing them from creating what it is they want. And it could be anything. It could be from a business, it could be writing a book, it could be just making a change. There's so many, you know, different things that people approach me for, but usually it's because they want to make some kind of change, but they're too scared to do it.
It's incredible. I mean, I feel like you see people every day who kind of have the mindset that's holding them back and causing inflammation in their bodies. And it's just so nice to know, even when you were talking about boundaries, I mean, I feel like even a lot of us don't realize, and I don't know, maybe you'll have to weigh in on this because I don't know how you feel as a male, but I feel like as females, we have a harder time with boundaries, and we have a harder time, you know, really being okay with setting those boundaries and, you know, creating that space in our brain. So it's, for me, I feel like it's amazing to have healthcare providers like yourself who are not only coaching people to be their best selves, but then also giving those tools and life lessons that we need in order to be happy and have that joyful, you know, feeling inside. I mean, how do you feel as a man? Do you feel like it's as hard to set boundaries?
Well, I think this goes back to, you know, our environment and our culture and how we're raised, right? I mean, men are taught to be strong and, you know, to be more of the aggressor. And so I think it's ingrained in us to set boundaries from the very beginning, right? To have an emotional disconnect almost, right? And whereas I'm just taking my family, for example, my sister was definitely a lot more connected, a lot more emotional, right? And she was allowed to express that because she was a female, right?
Yeah.
She was a woman. She was the little girl.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, I found my emotional outlet through music because I couldn't express it any other way, right? You know, crying is bad. You know, if you get angry, well, that's bad too. So emotions are bad. So I found my outlet through music, and that was something I could express myself, you know, fully and wholly and unconditionally, right? But most of us don't have that in this society, right? So I think that's kind of where these emotional boundaries get broken down. Women have a hard time setting those because they're taught to be the nurturer, their caregivers, right? And to embrace every emotion that comes your way. Whereas men are taught the opposite.
Yeah, it's very true. I'm so glad you found the music as a way of expressing yourself, because
he's an amazing guitarist.
I see so many you know, men who come through who are just learning to connect with their emotions, and that's what sent them into anxiety.
Sure.
As they get older, there's no more hiding or numbing down. They don't have the energy to do that as they get into their mid to late 40s. There, it all starts to bubble up. And that's when we start to see a lot of men here who are dealing with anxiety because they're getting emotional and they think it's negative and to get emotional. So, I mean, with boundaries, yeah, I think men have on the whole been trained to set good boundaries to a point where they're very enclosed and you just can't often reach them because they're so good at boundaries, which isn't so healthy. And yes, as you said, with women, I do think women, with a lot of women I see, it's about self-sacrifice and self-sabotage, and they've learned to put others first to such a point that they've forgotten who they are. So you've got this big divide going on, but once you, I mean, it doesn't apply to everybody, of course, but once you begin to identify that, and then there's a way into each of them through discussion and talking about which approach would help best. And it really does depend on the individual and how open they are, right? I'm sure you see that in your clinic. It's like how open they are to do this.
Yeah, and a lot of people are not connected. They don't even realize that mindset is the biggest key in their overall health and well-being, right? Because they have when they come to see me, there's a physical manifestation of pain, whether it's an acute injury or a chronic condition that's been, occurring for years or whatever, but they're processing this in a certain way. And the mindset is the hardest part of it, is getting people to actually accept their condition, right? This is what's happening to me. Okay, that's the first step. And now we're going to see what we can do to help make it better. But a lot of that comes from within.
Yeah.
That's the most challenging part of my job.
I can totally understand. And, having been in pain myself over the years with certain things, the last thing you want someone telling you is that your mindset needs to be adjusted. And it's like, you take the physical piece first as you're doing. And then as time moves on, it's like, okay, well, how did we get to this place first? How did the mind affect the body? Because as we know, there's a mind-body connection, right? And we call it psychoneuroimmunology, I believe. Top of my head, I think it's what it's called, in traditional medicine, where they believe in the mind and body connection. And so as you're healing them through the pain, it's like, let's not have this happen again. And I think that's a wonderful place that you're coming from in your work that you do in healing, to holistically support people so that they don't, obviously, people come back for management and pain management as needed, but at the same time, we want people ultimately to feel better. And that's such a great, authentic place to come from when you're offering this kind of service, and supporting them at all levels. And eventually, as people begin to realize, and it takes time, that their thoughts and beliefs and what they've experienced in the past is now influencing the choices they make in their life, whether it's, for example, I have a lot of people come in who tons of sugar, eating sugar to feel sweeter about life, numb their feelings out, right? And so, of course, it's creating inflammation, and they're not realizing that because they're just dealing with the emotional part first. And then it's like, well, why are you eating the sugar? What's going on there? What is that? And where's that come from? And women in particular, usually because they're so busy and stretched, they want something sweet to fill themselves with. And because they're not getting it in other areas of their life. So, well, let's look at other areas of your life. How can we bring more sweetness in and build your self-esteem and confidence so that you're not going to keep reaching for a bar of chocolate every day when you're out standing in the checkout, which is what I used to do. So, because you are so stressed and overwhelmed, and you just need that something quickly to make yourself feel uplifted for a minute. And the bar of chocolate does it in that moment. So it's like looking at all of that, how it all comes together as one big, beautiful, holistic package. Yeah.
It's funny how you brought that up, because I've been finding lately that come the afternoon when we don't eat a lot of sugar in our house. We really, the only thing that we keep is chocolate. Like, I'll keep dark chocolate, and come like 3 or 4 o'clock and I'm just exhausted, and I'm in the cupboard looking for that dark chocolate just to give me a little bit of a boost, so I can, going, and then I'll eat it, and then I'm like, okay, I'm good, I can continue working. So it's really interesting. I've never even put those two together.
It's a reward mechanism in the brain, and the brain, when it's overstretched, it wants a reward. It's human nature. So the key is not to be overstretched in the first place. And that's the boundaries, the self boundaries that we need to set. And it's like going home and having that glass of wine every time you get home, because you've had such a long day. And like, okay, it's nice, but after a while, it becomes a little bit more of a routine as part of your relaxation process, which it needn't be. Find something else for your reward. Find something else that's not going to be alcohol, that's going to, maybe go to a second glass or a third glass every single night. Right? Find a different reward, but then look at your lifestyle and your mindset around what you're doing every day. And why is it you're overachieving and pushing so hard in the first place? Are you in the wrong job? Are you not doing something you want to be doing? What is your purpose? Is there a way of creating something else for yourself where you are going to be more in control of your day and not feeling so reactive? And it's generating more renewing feelings, as I call them, for yourself, which the mind will respond to. And renewing feelings then release DHEA throughout the body, which is that lovely, nourishing hormone, which also then helps to reduce inflammation. So your thoughts and feelings are so important on a daily basis in terms of how the brain's reacting to what you're thinking or feeling, because the brain will send out different neurochemicals depending on, or hormones, depending on, you know, what you're choosing to think and where you're choosing to put your attention. So it's, you know, it's as people start to see the bigger picture, they usually come in with one aspect of why they're behaving in a certain way, or they've got a life situation that they've got going on. And as you start breaking it down and stepping into more of their mindset, and whether it's a fixed mindset they're coming from, or they're willing to go into a growth mindset, I say to them, you know, you can tell your brain anything. It will believe anything you tell it. It changes every day. It's a marvelous piece of machinery. It translates everything you're feeling. So why don't you pay attention to what you're telling it? So it can work on your behalf, really work on your behalf, rather than working against you and creating all the stress. So I think once people start to get to realize, you know, up in here, there's an amazing piece of machinery that is just stunningly effective, and that you do have the art of mastering it with where you put your attention and what your choices are, and you can rewire it through different techniques and methods quite easily. It's not difficult. I think there's a chance for all of us to start growing in a new way in this consciousness.
Absolutely. Yeah. But like we said earlier, people don't know what they don't know. So it's really creating the awareness and letting people realize that they have this potential to rewire their brain and change their state of consciousness, right? And to elevate themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a lot of, when all the work I'm doing, I'm simply saying to people, you know, you can change your thinking. You can. And and then they'll say, well, why? And then you give them some science, you know, and then as they start to build an awareness, they get confident then to take action. So it's really starting with that place of encouragement and showing through example, testimonials, you know, people who have been able to find their inner compass. That's why I got a compass on the back screen here, because it's about finding your inner compass and really, you know, setting a new direction for yourself through basically put attention on what you're thinking on. If you find yourself over the next few days thinking on negativity, just observe your thoughts. There's probably one overriding thought in there that keeps popping up. That is the one you want to start with, very simply, and move forward with that in terms of how you want to change it.
But the question is how, because that's what most people, they'll realize this, but then what are they supposed to do?
Yeah. What are the tools?
Yeah.
So the next step is very simply, as you discover the thought and what keeps coming up for you, even without NLP tools at the moment, things like I teach, you can shift into the contrary of that thought. So for example, let's say you want to apply for a new job that you've seen, okay? And it seems like it's a little more elevated than what you've been doing, and you're like, I don't have the courage to do this. I'm not good enough. Maybe I should stay where I am. Okay. That keeps coming up. I really want to apply for it, but maybe I should just stay where I am because I don't think I'm going to be good enough. So you can move into, first of all, well, why don't you feel good enough? You know, maybe there's a genuine fear there. And a genuine reason is that you need more training. If so, okay, be honest with yourself. But is it because, you know, your fear of the unknown keeps coming up? It's a fear of the unknown. Maybe what will happen if I apply for this? Well, what will happen if you don't? So that's what you're going to look at. What's the worst thing that will happen if I don't apply for this? And what's the worst thing that will happen if I do apply for this? Well, the worst thing that could happen is nothing. Or the worst thing that could happen is that you might get an interview. And then what's the worst thing that could happen with that? Right? So you ask yourself, what's the worst thing that could happen? and then start shifting into, I believe I can do this. I believe I can apply for this, and start the process that way. It might not happen overnight, but there are other tools you can use. There's like the tapping that we've used and talked about. Yeah. There is a quick coherence method that you can use. There is the daily habit practice where you start to learn from your mistakes. So there's many exercises out there, but ultimately it's really replacing a negative thought with a renewing feeling over and over and over again. And that's what the brain needs. It needs that practice. Yeah.
Well, and you were the one that taught me. We were doing another podcast interview a couple of weeks ago with another doctor in the Valley, and she was telling us about an experience that she had doing aerial yoga, and she fell and hit the ground, and with her on her head, and she had a friend with her who is trained in the emotional freedom technique, the EFT, and she immediately took her over and said, okay, we need to start doing this so you release the trauma. So maybe because I had kind of heard of EFT before I met you, but maybe you can explain for everybody listening and watching what exactly EFT is and how does it help somebody who has stored trauma or different negative beliefs in their mindset.
Well, emotional freedom technique is a system that's been used for about 20 years now as psychologists. They are still working it out. There's still a lot of research being done on it, but they call it a form of energy psychology, where energy can get trapped in the body from an event or trauma that someone's had. And so the trauma gets trapped as energy within the body. And so the actual practice of energy, the freedom technique, is a tapping method where you're tapping on key points of the body, like on the side of the hand here, on the top of the head, and you're tapping on different points which all relate to the acupressure or acupuncture meridians in the body. As you're tapping on these points, I'm just showing you right now, you're saying a statement, and there is a combination of saying a positive statement with the tapping. There's one under here. The positive statement with the tapping that helps to retrain the brain. And for some reason, the amygdala that sits in the center of the brain and holds the emotions needs to have the tapping feeling, sensation, to help it shift, along with you making a statement of releasing the pain and then stepping into a positive renewing feeling. So what happens is that you start to, after doing a couple of cycles of this structure of tapping, you begin to what we call disassociate from the original pain. You dial the volume down on what your initial pain was when you started. And it could be pain, it could be a negative thought, it could be a hurt, it could be a feeling of rejection, any number of things. And the important piece of it is that you measure it yourself so you know it's working. And so you usually identify your pain point, whatever that pain point is, at a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the worst. You start tapping out your negative statement about the pain and then replacing it with a renewing statement. You do the whole cycle of tapping. And then you measure yourself. Am I at a 9 now, or have I gone down to a 6? And you keep tapping until you've reduced the pain as far as you can down to a 3 or a 2, or you might get stuck at a 4. What you do is you do this on a daily basis or over the day until you get to 0. So that's it in a kind of like a nutshell. The key, of course, is identifying what the pain is. Now, it could be, with your lady who had the accident and yoga, it would be an immediately, even though I feel maybe she felt fear, maybe she felt the pain, maybe she had a headache, maybe she was really traumatized. It could be, even though I feel really afraid right now, I'm okay. I choose to release this pain. This no longer affects me. I love and accept myself. Maybe she could have said, I'm calm. All right. So she starts to calm her nervous system down. So she would be saying that on each point or a variation of that over and over again. And what happens then is there's DHEA coming through from the brain. The brain starts sending out this lovely nourishing hormone, which helps to calm the body. And that way, then you're less likely to get post-traumatic stress from it. You might actually be able to reduce inflammation by doing that, by letting your brain know it's okay, calm down, everything's okay, just like a first responder would say to you after an accident. So that, it's been used. I use it in my mentoring and coaching because I believe that we cannot really move on with any kind of coaching or goals until we started to release the negativity and patterns of why you can't do something in the first place. You can tell someone to, that they could go and walk Mount Everest or climb Mount Everest, over and over again. But if they believe they can't, they won't. So that's where the tapping can come in as one of the exercises that we use to just dial the volume down on those triggers. So I use it a lot with the veteran Navy SEALs that I've worked with and the military when they come back from war. Had terrible experiences that they share with me, and I've had to use the tapping just by listening to what they've been through. So goodness knows what, the extent that they're suffering of what they've seen, because it is so horrific that I've had to use tapping for myself to just diminish that and what I'm hearing. Yeah, but it's very effective. I use it all the time.
That's so amazing, and it's readily available to everyone.
Totally.
Yeah, it's incredible.
I do mine almost every day. Yeah. Like if I have just little, even if it's little stuff that comes up, I'll sit, in the shower, I'll do it like, I do it, kind of a lot. And it doesn't, I mean, it's not going to stop negative thoughts, but it almost kind of the reaction to it and the sensation. And I don't know if maybe you both can answer this, but is it the cortisol when you are feeling those, because obviously you have a thought and then you have a bodily, a sensation in your body, which then creates the emotion. But is that cortisol that's creating that kind of fight or flight response?
Or adrenaline?
Adrenaline. Yeah, there's the cortisol, there's the adrenaline, there's a whole bunch of stress hormones that just love to run around, and they stay in your body for about, I understand actually stay in your body for about 12 hours. These, I can't pronounce the name, but the cortisol type hormones and the adrenaline, they stay with you for a long time. So unless you can do something like tapping, you're going to be in a bad mood all day if you're not able to release these. And it's going to affect everything, your choices, all of it. So yes, self-doubt. Where I help people is to get very clear on what the pain point is to begin with. A lot of people don't understand how to identify emotions. I mean, that in of itself is a big old learning. We have emotional codes that we operate from. So we've all had some kind of abandonment or rejection over the years, or fear of failure, or we give a lot of love but we don't get love back. There's just so many different emotions. So it's helping define what is the overriding emotional code that's going on right now for you that you're operating from. And then you're making all these choices in your relationship. So for a lot of people, they might choose their life partner because they recognize some of the toxicity in their mother, in their life partner, and it's familiar to them, and it's so subconscious that they'll move into that relationship and then end up splitting up because they didn't realize, But then you could say, well, maybe it was meant to be. There's so many different ways of looking at it, so many ways. But it's helping people identify what it is that's holding them back. And then the big light bulb goes on of like, oh, that's why I keep making my choices like this, because I'm afraid of being hurt, or I'm afraid of not being liked. So I don't step forward just in case someone won't like me. And we're like, okay, so let's do the tapping around that. Even though I have a fear of not being liked, I'm okay. I choose to release this. This no longer affects me. I love and accept myself, and then moving into, I love myself. I love speaking with people. I speak to people without an agenda of what I need. It's building that in and helping people define what their tapping statement is. It's good to do like, even though I feel hurt, you can start that way, or even though I feel upset, that's really good. Even though I feel afraid, those are really good, what I call surface level, umbrella type statements. And then you can start digging deeper, diving deeper into, well, what's underneath that fear? What's underneath that anger? You know?
Well, and I feel like we as humans, like we all just want to feel connected. And
Yeah.
that's really what it is. It all boils down to all of the mindset issues that we all have. We all are just searching for connection. And I feel like nowadays, even though we are so connected via social media, we are also so disconnected because that connection is almost superficial in a way. And
Yeah.
you don't have that deep, I think a lot of people are lacking in that deep connection. And so we're all looking for acceptance. We're looking for attention in order to get that connection back.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. It's a lot of isolation going on because people also see through that social media, someone's doing really well, or they're out there living the life, you know, and that really just tanks some people's self-esteem and self-confidence. They're like, well, I'm not doing that. Oh, they feel shamed or, you know, sad that they're not doing the same thing. So yes, it's a human connection. Without it, it's hard to survive. Yeah.
well, and I think for people listening, I feel like people need to understand that no matter what life you have, nobody's life is perfect. I mean,
Correct.
our life isn't perfect. We both go through our own struggles. Like you know, have probably had your same thing. Like all of our friends, family, everybody has their own inner struggle that they work on every single day. And some I feel like have their struggle might be a little bit greater based on how you were talking about earlier, how they were brought up and their environment. I mean, that plays a big role, but I do think that it's hard because so many people are comparing themselves to others, and it's just, we're all on the same path. Some people might be a little bit more ahead, some people might be a little bit behind, but it's just focusing on where you are at. And that in itself is hard, right? With mindset. I mean, that's something that you have to work on a daily basis, because it just seems like it's a very natural way for as humans to kind of think and to be. We're always kind of maybe not comparing ourselves to people that are more of an acquaintance, but it seems like our close family, our close friends, we tend to, and like you said, social media, we tend to compare ourselves. So
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a really good point. And there's quite a few things there that you're raising. Ultimately, the goal is to be in a state of not minding. And not minding doesn't mean not caring.
right.
Not minding is that, oh, look, so and so is doing really well over there. That's great. You know, celebrating the fact, embracing what they're doing, and then embracing what you're doing and where you're at right now, because we're all different levels of the journey. And life is going to throw us curveballs all the time. That's what life is, and that's how we grow. And I call them growth opportunities, because that's why we have these curveballs come in. And then how you want to manage those curveballs is entirely up to you. You're not being punished because of them. They're actually helping you grow. It's a gift. And that's a hard one, because people will say, well, I just got cancer, or I just found out I've got this or a health issue, and that doesn't feel like a gift. Well, absolutely, totally understand what you're saying there. Somewhere in there, though, there will be a silver lining. I mean, I've got to this age and seen many cycles of life in my lifetime. There is always a silver lining. No matter what you're going through, even if it is the hardest of things to accept with health or death of a loved one, there is always a silver lining. And you might not see it immediately, but over time, as you grow, because you have to grow to meet that circumstance that's happened to you, um, you will see it eventually. But it's hard because you're in the dark in the process of it. So what you hold on to is the knowing that there is a silver lining, that is not minding what others are going through and focusing on where you're at, focusing what's important to you, where you want to be. And when something comes into your world, seeing it as a growth opportunity for yourself to learn and grow from. That's why we're here. We're not here just to be on vacation for 90 years and then disappear. We're here to have a mix of, and that's what social media is very negative at, because it tends to lend us to believe the fact that life is just going to be a box of chocolates for 90 years. And if it's not, you've done something terribly wrong. So no, we're here to learn. It's the soul's university of being here in life and not minding what others are doing. If you can remember that phrase, I think is key. And having some tools to support you, because without those tools or someone to talk to, it's hard. It is hard to move through it, but there are tools out there. And it is about talking and seeking out support and help from providers like ourselves, or whoever it is, you resonate with. So yeah. I had 2 years ago, I lost my mother and my brother-in-law within a month of each other.
Wow.
And then a family pet. Now I'm saying this because, of course, everyone will understand that was a very difficult time. Now, if I hadn't had the tools I had,
Yeah.
I don't know how I would have managed that one.
Yeah.
And there were other things going on in my life at the same time as that. And you really, in those moments, need to stay focused on what's important to you, to your health and well-being. So what you're eating, how you're doing your self-care and maintenance, and your emotional well-being. And it's okay to be upset and cry when you want to. Mm-hmm. And then also working on the pain of the loss with the tools that you have. So it's bringing in like self-care options to take care of yourself during this time. And, as I said to you, every single day I'm constantly having something coming into my world, and it's just choosing how I want to manage it.
Can I ask what was your growth during that time when you had all of those traumatic events happen?
I think it's a good question. I think my growth was recognizing that it was okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
And that, because my sister had COVID at the time. Well, when my mom died, she had COVID, and then her husband died. And then it was crazy what was going on. Wow. And so it was like, okay, it's okay not to be okay. And then taking windows of time where I would be helping others and, being there and of support, and then not, and taking time for myself to nourish myself, which in the past I wouldn't have done. I would have been, as I said earlier, when we started, save, 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 fix, 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 everybody, but this time I didn't. So that was the growth. Yeah.
I feel like that gives a lot of inspiration for people, because I can definitely relate to what you're saying. I grew up, and back to what you were saying as a man, because I grew up with a very strong mom, and she was, very strong. I very rarely saw her get emotional. And so growing up, I kind of had this idea, if I show emotion, and this is something I'm still working on to this day, but if I show emotion, it means I'm weak. And so getting to that point where you're okay with not being okay, and it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It doesn't mean that you are weak or you have these, there's something wrong with your brain. It's normal part of emotions. And I think for me, and like you were saying with men, when you try and shut those emotions off, it creates almost like this energy in your body, which then can create anxiety, probably maybe some depression. And it's really, you're meant to release those emotions, your body is. And so just letting yourself feel your way through and not trying to shut them off and not judging yourself for them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And when we are exposed to parents who hold in their emotions for whatever reason, they've got their emotional baggage too.
Exactly. Yeah.
But we don't know that as kids. We're with them, and we want to feel safe with them. So we will copy what they do, thinking that's the right thing to do. because we're just watching their experiences and how they're handling it. But yeah, holding on to those emotions tight, they will explode at some point. There is a buildup of pressure, and it will come out in some way. It could be a physical health issue. It could be a discombobulation, as I call it, a meltdown, however you want to see it. And that's when the healing begins.
Yeah.
There's nothing to be afraid in that. There is nothing to be afraid or worried about, because it's such a release, and it actually feels good.
Mm-hmm.
Feels good to cry.
It does. It feels so, I mean,
Yeah.
and they even, don't they show in studies that when you cry, you're actually like releasing cortisol and lowering inflammation?
Yeah. Inhibiting cortisol. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
There's a key point in acupressure. I don't know if you can see it, but it's in the middle of the chest on the sternum. And it's usually sore. So if you go down the sternum and track down the sternum to a sore point, it is an acupressure point that helps to, I think it's a little higher for you, Nikki, up here. It's around that area. Any one of those points in there, if it's sore, that's usually suppressed emotion. And yeah, because it's all around the heart area. So if you press it gently and just gradually, I do this here at the Anxiety Center, I teach them how to hold that point. And it really hurts to start with. It's quite sore. And then sometimes tears will come.
Interesting.
Acupuncturists use it they put a needle in there, but you can use your finger and it will help release anxiety and tension. And it may bring tears, and people might not even know what they're crying about, and that's fine. It's just a release of tears. And that helps to calm as well. So if you're having a hard time crying, I have a lot of clients who want to cry but can't. If you hold that point, it's a great way. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I'm gonna try it, because I do have a hard time. The only time I can actually cry is during a movie. Like if I'm watching, there's
Or
been
an after
time.
school special.
That's what he makes fun of my after school specials that I watch. But in the past, when I've had I felt the emotion and wanted to release it and I can't. And so I'll look for the saddest movie possible just so I can cry.
Well, that's one way of doing it. I mean,
Whatever
that's what
works.
it takes, right? Exactly. Whatever works. Whatever works.
Oh my gosh, I'm loving this conversation.
Me
Thank
too.
you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank
Okay.
you. Well, it's just lovely to sit with you, and it's so comfortable just sharing and talking and sharing our own experiences, and just being with you like this is wonderful. So thank you.
You're welcome. So for people who are listening, if they want to work with you and, find out if you would be a match for them, how do they find you?
They can reach me on my website, which is nicolasalter.com. And then there's a discovery call option there that they can just, connect with me on. And they can send me, there's actually an option as well to send me an email with questions on anything that you have going on for you right now and you want some support with. On a mindset or emotional support, feel free to just email me, and then we can work out from there too. If there's something there we could work together on.
Great. And for anybody who's listening to this, we will also have this posted on YouTube as well. So you'll be able to see, and I'll put her her website in the show notes as well.
Okay,
so you can easily find Nicola. And are you on social media?
I am. I'm under Nicola Salter Loves Life. I'm not posting as much as one should be, if there is a rule at the moment, but I'm under Nicola Salter Loves Life. I'm also on LinkedIn if you need to check me out there too.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for giving us all of your knowledge and expertise. We really appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you too. Everything you're doing and your philosophy and your mission. I know actually we don't know each other so well, but I've been working with Nikki, so I get to hear, and I am so excited for both of you and how you've also begun your journey in supporting others through the service that you create. And it's so needed. And I just hope that more and more people start to find your astounding work that you do. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, great to meet you.
You too. Thank you for having me on today. It's been great.
Okay.